If you've got Song of Songs open, that'd be useful. Now, it's fair to say, I think we know this, we can relate to this, that any relationship that you are in changes over time. You draw closer to someone and further away. They have their ups and downs. They mature, they grow cold, they have their seasons, they develop. Now, I mean particularly romantically, you're in a romantic relationship, you're in a marriage, but also it's true of friendship, it's true in your family. And it's true of Christ too. And this is the second sermon that we've done on the Song of Songs. I won't repeat everything I said last time, but what we did say is that it's the Song of Songs. It's the ultimate love song. On the face of it, it is between a young couple, a shepherd and a shepherdess. But the point is it points us to Christ and the church. And in the Bible, often we see Christ as the groom and the church as the bride. And so it's not a metaphor, it's not a hidden meaning, it's not an allegory as such. Rather, it's a lens. This human relationship is a lens to aid us to see and feel Christ's love. So it's both wisdom and points us to Christ. And I think it's relevant. I don't think it's relevant. It is relevant, whoever you are. Whatever situation you are with Jesus or in relationships, this has relevance for you. We'll see more of that, why I think that as you go through. So last time we saw our capacity for desire. All points to our desire behind that desire, our desire for him. All beauty points us to Christ. But the big thing about the song is that Christ desires us. And he desires us strongly. That we are special to him. Like a lover chases the object of his love. So that's what Christ does with us. So the Song of Songs is a wisdom book. It's about the wisdom in and for relationships. Especially those relationships which are heading towards or in marriage. But also for other human relationships. But most of all, it uses what we know, understand, and experience about love, even in the negative, to understand and feel God's love. And today the theme is found, lost, found. Or found, lost, found again. And that takes up much of the book. So to help us, I've done a bit of a map of sort of how the book fits together. And I'm including the verses and also which sermon, so the numbers at the end is the sermon I'll tackle. So I don't know quite what I'm going to say, but I've got a gist of where I'm going. And so it starts with the desire, their desire to be together, their desire for each other. It ends with them together, and that love is everlasting. And I called it everlasting love. See what I did there. The centre, I'm going to tackle one sermon, is the wedding service, where King Solomon is a guest. I don't think he's his wedding. I'll explain that next week, a bit today. And then about the wedding night, which is pictured as a garden. Garden, sound familiar? Beginning end of the Bible. And either side of the wedding, so the bit we're in now, the bit we're in a couple of weeks, is this found, lost, found. So a big chunk of the book is about finding other, losing them, and finding them again. And this week is where in both cases it is put to us as a dream quality about it. So most writers say this is not real, but it is a dream. In fact, it's a nightmare for her to think that they are apart. And this week the problem, so the first found, lost, found, the problem is him, that he has gone missing, which is interesting if he represents Christ. And after the wedding, she's the problem, that she shows indifference to him and strains the relationship. I've thought ahead, it's called that you've lost that loving feeling. So you see what goes on in my mind. We'll get to that after we've thought about the marriage. So that's how we're going to look at this, and particularly this morning we're thinking found, lost, found. They're about lovers through whom we see Christ. So firstly, found, chapter 2, verses 8 to 17. Now the Hebrew doesn't have, with the bit that Ros read to us, straightforward, it all seems to be in her voice. The The Hebrew doesn't have he or she bits, but in the language it's clear who's speaking. In English, we have to mark it down, so we lose that thread. So this is her speaking of him. She is found by him, and she wants to be found by him. And she admires his energy in how we get to that point. So last week, we saw that she was insecure, and yet he wants her. Doesn't matter what she thinks. He wants her, he desires her. And she's watching him track her down. And verse 8, she hears his voice. And then he leaps over the hills and the mountains. Verse 9, he stands at the wall and he gazes to get a glimpse of her. And he calls to her to join him so they might go away together. And he uses again this garden imagery. We thought about that last week. We'll think about it in other weeks. This garden imagery is beautiful, and it's about the sensory enjoyment of love. And now they found each other, they want to see each other, they want to be together, they hear each other's voices. That's what they want to do. As a typical image, a typical picture of love, and particularly love in the early stages. Now I remember when I was a young adult, there was a man at our church who fell in love with a lady in the church, and he said to our minister, nobody has ever felt like this. And our minister went, he was about my age now, he went, actually younger, he went, when it's common. So we know what they mean. The relationships develop and change, but there's this early stage, and that's what we see in the song. The man comes running after the girl. In verse 18, I think that's about the foxes. I think it's about clearing all the obstacles to their love. And she likes this, and she's encouraging him to come near her. She's enjoying it in that sense. Now, it's a wisdom book, so it's a wisdom about relationships. So notice he makes the effort, and she encourages him. There's none of this sort of trendy, let's be cool about it. I remember being given a lift home by two sisters and their brother, and they were telling me about this man they admired. And I was going, does he know? She was going, oh gosh, I never speak to him. I'm never in the same room as him. I was going, so nice of you for him. So there's none of this being cool and hard to get business, but not being inappropriately obvious either. And so through the song, both parties commit to the one. He commits to her. She commits to him. And that's a picture of Christ, isn't it? That especially the early part of the relationship, we see Christ's energy. He is the one who goes to his people. He's the one who goes over the hills and the mountains to find them. He peers in on them and calls to them. He clears what stands between them. We see that most clearly at the cross. Why? We saw last week. Because whatever she thinks of herself, he desires her. Why? Because he finds her delightful. That's why. And a repeating thing we'll see in Song of Songs is Christ delights in his church. He delights in you. So what's true of the whole church is true of the individual. He delights in you. He goes to great lengths to know you, which we see sort of poetically here. Christ has one church. She has one husband. And that's why I think it is the Song of Songs and not the Song of Solomon. If you remember the story of Solomon, he doesn't have one wife. Read 1 Kings 11 if you want to find out how many wives he has and how he managed his diary. So interestingly, Hebrew, Greek, Latin all says Song of Songs. But, and I think verse 1, it says Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. I think it says, Hebrew actually says Song of Songs for Solomon. It's dedicated to Solomon. We'll think about that next week. So, husband-wife imagery is common in the Bible. And often what we find in the Old Testament is about Israel being a bad wife. She has eyes for another. And throughout the Bible, idolatry and adultery are connected. And we see this a problem in the church. Our devotion to Christ is mixed. Other things get in there. But the distinct note of the song is he delights in you. That this Christ bride imagery is not randomly picked. He delights in you. And that effect, last week we saw how that affects how you see yourself. But also, what I want to think about for a second is it affects how we see each other. Because we together, and the churches around the world, are the bride of Christ. So imagine again, you're on a date. And this is not the first date. You've had a few dates with this person. And you're thinking, I wonder where this is going. And so you say to the other person, I love you. I think I love you. I'm pretty sure I love you. You are lovely. Everything about you is lovely. And you're so pretty. But your body, gross. I mean, will there be another date? I suspect not. Now, think of this. Christ is our head and he is our husband. The church is his body and his bride. So it's true that Christ is perfect and in every sense, and we're not. His bride, his body, is not perfect. But we thought last week about how he makes us perfect. But as we talk, and as we talk about the church, his body and bride, as we look at each other, Christ thinks of the whole church as special. So when I speak of another Christian, I've been struck by this when Christians speak of, this is pointed by the way, but when Christians speak of other Christians, when we speak of other churches of our own church, you think this is Christ's bride for whom he died and made pure. And that should think about how we think about each other and how we think about this church, any church. There's all kinds of problems in churches. They do all sorts of things they shouldn't be doing biblically. But at the end of the day, this is Christ's body and his bride. You know, I don't go up to anybody and go, oh yeah, I met your wife. Yeah, awful woman. Just if you thought it. You would not say that. Why do we do that? Why do we treat Christ's bride differently? Christ died for all of his church, each of them, and he values all of them as his church. Christ came to find the lost because he delights in them. When you think about the church, you think of a Christian, this is someone for whom Christ bounded over the hills and mountains and died. He delights. And we saw last week that he makes them not beautiful, he makes them beautiful. So we find him, he finds us. But then it is lost in chapter 3, verses 1 to 3. So starting at chapter 3, verse 1, on my bed by night. It seems this is not a real event. So this is a dream within the song. And it comes across as a nightmare. So she misses him and she's sad. Repeatedly it says she's looking for him. And something here is more than just the physical aspect. There's an emotional distance. He is unobtainable to her. And so she goes to the watchman and the police, and they can't help. There's a phase in a relationship where you feel the other party is distant from you. You feel that this is beyond your control. Nobody can help you in this part of the relationship. And that's what every Christian knows of Christ. At times he feels distant and withdrawn, even absent. Medieval Christians call this the dark night of the soul. And the reasons for this feeling is mysterious. So in Hezekiah's life, we're told that God withdrew from him as a test. In the Psalms, especially Psalm 30, verse 7, it talks about continued sin. We all sin, but then repeating the same sin. Often God hides his face from us, forcing change on us. Things can obstruct, like in any friendship or marriage or parental relationship, things can obstruct a relationship, can't they? So our time, ironically our marriages, guilt over past sin, all those things stand between us and Christ. And other times there seems no reason that we can find. But it does, it should, cause us. This is the same in any marriage, it's the same in any friendship, any familiar relationship. Apparent distance creeps into relationships. And so you then ask, if you don't ask this question, you're the problem in the relationship. And that is, this question is simply, is it me? Is it something I've done or said? Is there something about me that's changed? Or I'm doing differently? How do I close the gap? But what do I have to do? First love. Remember your first love. When you feel lost, remember your first love. Song of Songs is an invite to remember your first love. Pursue Jesus Christ. And there's a reward for doing so, because the next thing is found again. Chapter 3, verse 4, scarcely had I passed the watchman. She holds him and she won't let go. She takes him to the family home, and in family, if you've ever had this, where you take, or it's been said of you, you take someone who you quite like home, and mum's embarrassing and goes, "Oh, he's a keeper," or something like that. That's what's happening here. When we find Christ, don't let him go. Some of you are huggers, some of you are not, and most of you. Is that a lot of particularly modern worship songs are a bit "Jesus, will you be my boyfriend?" and they're embarrassing, because if Jesus is real, he is, right, and he's a man, okay, am I going to sing the song, those worship songs to gossip? Well, of course I wouldn't anyway, but it would be weird if I used that language to real or something. People would go, the minister's gone weird. And so, yeah, those songs are strange. I think it's something about our culture that we sing those songs, but there is a point behind it. He is our lover that we are holding on to. Delight to see a conversion not that long ago here, see some enthusiastic, and you might go, I used to be like that. But you are meant to mature and grow on, but those distances they're not meant to be an end. There's a hope of closeness.